What's going on, folks? I am Goat, and welcome back to the breakdown. So, a little later than promised, but it is what it is. I'm shooting this at 3:53 p.m. on February 11th. I'm going to try and make this as quick as possible because who's got time to burn, right? There's enough Radio Row crap and everything else going on with Super Bowl coverage that we don't really need me just rambling the fuck on about random stuff, right? Let's talk about the basics, though, all right? So, we have the Kansas City Chiefs versus the Philadelphia Eagles, the number one from the NFC versus the number one from the the number one from the AFC versus the number one from the NFC. This is a interesting matchup. Now, the reason I've held off so long is to figure out what both teams are like physically at this point in the season, because obviously every single Super Bowl, every team is coming in beat up in some way. And, you know, I mean, we had, as Rich Eisen would put it, the Mahomes ankle gate. You know, everybody covering Mahomes' ankle. And then in the championship game, we had Kadarius Toney go out with an ankle injury. Juju Smith-Schuster went out with a knee injury. McCole Hardman went out re-aggravating his hip. Travis Kelce was playing the game with back spasms. And obviously, Willie Gay Jr. went out with an injury. And to top all that off, Mahomes had a high ankle sprain on his right ankle, which is the worst fucking thing for a right-handed quarterback, because that's his basically his plant foot, you know, the kind of like a kicker. You don't want them to fuck up their left ankle if they're a right-footed kicker, so on and so forth. You don't want them to fuck up their plant foot, the one where they got to throw off or stance and maintain pressure and so on. So it's a lot going on with the Chiefs. On the flip side, the Eagles have been relatively healthy, okay, which is good for the Eagles. And so the matchup comes down to Kadarius Toney is going to play. Willie Gay Jr. is going to play. Juju Smith-Schuster is going to play. You know, full practice participants. Now, Mahomes obviously going to play. Kelce going to play. L'Jarius Sneed, I don't want to leave him out. He was taken out in a concussion early in the championship game. He's going to play. And, you know, Mahomes is saying, you know, he's not quite 100%, but I mean, he definitely wasn't 100% in the championship game and pulled that off against a very good defense. So pretty crazy matchup here. So this comes down to your normal football game stuff. I'd love to make this about something other than what it is, but this is exactly what it is. The Eagles offense presents a very interesting issue for the Kansas City defense. Okay, they have a deep threat with two of their receivers, without question. They have a deep threat from both sides of the field. They've got a decent mid-level threat with their tight end. They've got a very interesting running scheme with their RPO because of Jalen Hurts and Sanders. They have such a crazy amount of things that they can do. It's a lot like Baltimore Ravens 2.0, except better. Okay. Now, with all that being said, there is a bit of a question mark, and I've been saying it all fucking season long, you know, and yes, I think barring injury, the championship game would have really answered these questions. I mean, all around would have answered these questions. The Eagles came into the season with what basically looked like a pretty soft schedule. And although, I mean, you got to give Brian Daboll credit with the Giants, first of all. Flipping the Giants around the way that he did is pretty goddamn phenomenal as it sits. But, you know, the Giants defensively, having Wink Martindale as their defensive coordinator, obviously made a dramatic difference with the Giants' defensive side of the ball. The offensive side of the ball looked much better, but honestly, you can attribute a ton of that to Saquon Barkley, and then basically keeping opponents' defenses honest and giving Daniel Jones more time. But that offense is still a work in progress. So all three meetings with the Giants, I just don't consider to be dramatically crazy games. You know, the Cowboys games, kind of whatever. The Cowboys are so hit or miss, and it's no knock against Dallas, but the Cowboys are either a lot of flair or a lot of fail. I mean, that's just kind of the way they go. And it's sad because there's a lot of potential on that Dallas team. You know, the Commanders are the Commanders. They're such a mess. They've got the potential to be a really good team, but just haven't quite hit the hump, gone over the hump yet, you know? So their division itself is very interesting. Yes, 3 of their teams made it to the division, but that also speaks to how bad the NFC was. Kind of is what it is. But the Eagles' schedule overall, like, let's just pull this up, actually. Philadelphia Eagles. Okay, so let's get past preseason. So the Eagles play the Vikings week 1. Week 1's always up in the air. Okay, it really is. I've said that so long. I hate doing picks on week 1. Or no, hold on. Preseason. Okay, week 2. Week 1 was the Lions. The Lions, even early, were keeping games close, but they were not completing. They were not capping off and finishing games. The Lions came on strong at the end of the season. So the Lions were very weak at the beginning of the season. The Eagles gave up 35 points to the Lions. They won the game 38-35, but they gave up 35. Week 2. The first quarter of the season, the first 4 games of the season are always very, very difficult because you never really know what the hell a team's going to do. Now, Minnesota, very weak defense. Mediocre to weak defense. Okay, Eagles beat the Vikings 24-7. Week 3. Eagles played the Commanders 24-8. Week 4, going against a Jacksonville Jaguars team that was still in a full rebuild or a full revamp of culture with Doug Peterson, and they skimmed away with a 29-21 win. Week 5, the Eagles played the Cardinals, finished out that game 20-17, and the Cardinals were bad this year. Week 6, Eagles beat out the Cowboys 26-17. You kind of figure Cowboys-Eagles are usually pretty close. Week 6, going against Kenny Pickett, if I remember right, it was his first start. Or Pickens, whatever the hell. Their quarterback. 35-13 was not a good game for him. Next week, Eagles play the Texans 29-17. No shock. The next week, the Eagles' first loss at the with the Commanders visiting 32-21. The next week, Eagles played the Colts, barely beat them 17-16. The next week, Eagles played the Packers. The Packers were finally coming on, kind of opening up and coming on, and they barely, like they gave up 33 points to Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. Very, very young group of people. Next week, Eagles were playing a somewhat depleted Titans team at this point because they had a lot of injuries. 35-10. Eagles win. Next game, Eagles at Giants. No shock. 48-22. Next game after that, the Eagles played the Bears. The Bears are a terrible team this year. They won 25-20. Game after that, Eagles at Cowboys. Cowboys won 40-34. Game after that. Now, granted, this was, I believe, Minshew. Yeah. Minshew played, I think 3 games. I think he was Eagles, Bears, Eagles, Cowboys, Eagles, Saints. Let's just look. Yeah, Gardner Minshew at the Cowboys game. You sack of shit. Do your job. Let's see here. Saints, Eagles was your job, Gardner Minshew. Wow, this thing's really going to be a douchebag. So yeah, Cowboys, Giants, Eagles was also... Okay, so the Giants, Eagles was Jalen Hurts. So yeah. So, hold on. Let's check the Bears game. I didn't check the Bears game. Yeah, so Minshew played... I mean, he obviously lost his games. but it's the defense that I'm looking at. I'm not worried about the offense. Okay. When you're running your backup quarterback, I never worry about the offense because you just never know what the fuck's going to happen. Okay. But Hurts goes out with a shoulder injury. Minshew comes in. He plays the Cowboys game. They lose 40-34. But the fucking Eagles defense gave up 40 fucking points to a very talented Cowboys roster. Then they go into the Saints, who've been struggling and reeling this season, and they lose 20-10. Jalen Hurts comes back. They barely win that game 22-16. Now, they come into the divisional round. The Eagles blew out the Giants. No shock. 38-7. The NFC Conference Championship game, Eagles played the 49ers. The 49ers had no quarterbacks by, early into the third quarter. So they obviously blew out the 49ers 31-7. Okay. Kind of hard to really get a good bead on the Eagles because the Eagles defense has a susceptibility of giving up big plays, but they're also a really, really rough defense from in like the short to mid-level passing in the center of the field. Like their linebacking core isn't necessarily the quickest at reaction. Now they're good at stopping the run. They do have a very good secondary. I'm not questioning the fact that their secondary is good, but they are susceptible to kind of giving up some big ass plays. And the Chiefs have some playmakers that can do it. Juju Smith-Schuster, mid-level slant player, but he can also play the deep ball. Marquez Valdez-Scantling is definitely a player that can give up, or that can really open up, the big, plays. Travis Kelce, absolutely excellent, spectacular, like probably number one tight end in the division or in the NFL this year, if I remember correctly. He just went the fuck off this season, and he's probably one of the most unstoppable forces when it comes to a tight end and that mid-level passing game. But he can also go deep. He can do fucking, outside, screens. I mean, hell, Kelce can run the ball. But then you're also talking about a three-headed monster of runners. Not even counting Mahomes, who Lord only knows how mobile he's going to be. But you've got Isaiah Pacheco, you've got Jerick McKinnon, and then you've got Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Okay, so you've got three, and Edwards-Helaire's kind of had a decline at the back end of the season due to injuries, but he's back and he's available, and we all know he's kind of like a little bowling ball when he gets going. He hasn't quite lived up to the potential the team wanted, but it's something. So let's look at what the Chiefs' schedule has been. Okay, on the flip side of this coin, Chiefs at Cardinals. We already talked about it. Cardinals had a rough season. Chiefs 44, Cardinals 21. And truth be told, that 21 was more at the tail end of the game, just trash touchdowns. The Chargers, not an easy team to beat, 27-24. The Colts was Chiefs at Colts. The Chiefs were doing really good up until they started having a bunch of special teams blunders, missed kicks, muffed punt returns, and it kept the Colts in the game, and the Colts ended up beating that game 20-17. But it wasn't a defensive issue. It wasn't an offensive issue, aside from the Colts defense was actually playing pretty damn well that game and kind of keeping the Chiefs in check a little, right? Chiefs go into the Buccaneers, absolutely blew their fucking doors off because, once the Chiefs got ahead, it just didn't look like the Bucs were in this game. Chiefs ended up 41-31, although that seems kind of rough. That was a bunch of trash yards a bunch of trash points at the end. Raiders at Chiefs. Raiders, although crappy, have been a very scrappy team this season. Didn't live up to the hype, but they have stayed in quite a few of their games. And because of a failed 2-point conversion and them just squeaking at the tail end of the game, trying to get anything going that they could, Chiefs defense stood strong, held out the Raiders, and ended up winning the game 30-29. But the Chiefs Raiders, Chiefs Broncos, Chiefs Chargers are almost always close games because the AFC West is just scrappy as fuck. Bills at Chiefs. Truth be told, this came down to a very unfortunate fumble by Travis Kelce. Otherwise, I'm pretty sure the Chiefs would have won this game. It was a very close game, but I'm pretty sure that the Chiefs, this could have gone to overtime and then to a different conversation. But unfortunately, Kelsey fumbled the ball late in the game, and the Bills capitalized, getting a touchdown because the Chiefs were up 20-17, and the Bills ended up capitalizing on it with a touchdown and finished out the game 24-20. Is what it is. Chiefs went in against, at that point, the number one defense, who was finally getting healthy, against the San Francisco 49ers, and dropped 44 on the fucking 49ers. Yeah. Chiefs went into the Titans. At this point, this was the game, I believe, that Tannehill was out with injury, or was taken out with injury. One of the two. It did go to overtime, because their defense was still no punk, but their offense was struggling, and they went to overtime, won on a game-ending field goal, 20-17. But the Titans' defense was quite scrappy. Jaguars, they were just starting to find their identity. They had gotten a win. They were just getting ready to go on their roll, and then the Chiefs stymied them 27-17, and that was with losing 2 receivers. I mean, they lost, I think it was MVS. No. I know they lost Juju in that game to a concussion. And then MVS got dinged up in that game, if I remember correctly. Next, Chiefs-Chargers game. Again, and that Charger and the Jaguars team was just finding its identity at that point, so it wasn't like they were a punk-ass team at that point. Early in the season, the Jaguars were kind of a team to be bullied, okay? They really were, but at the tail end of the season, because we're talking that's week 10, okay? Week 10, Jaguars, they were starting to wake up. They were trying to dig themselves out of a fucking hole. So the next week, though, going back against the Chargers, another tight, AFC West style game. Chiefs won that game 30-27. Chiefs going up against the Rams, wasn't really much question in this one, 26-10. Chiefs go against the Bengals. As the Chiefs and Bengals had been up to this point, it was a tight game, and the Bengals ended up with a fucking game-winning field goal. That's just how it was, 27-24. Not a surprise. Chiefs went against the Broncos, AFC West game. Scrappy as shit. Chiefs beat the Broncos 34-28. The Texans game, the Texans and the Colts game was the anomaly games for me. Those were the weird ones for me that I just looked at like, holy crap, man. But, well, and the Bills game, because honestly, that fumble, Kelsey doesn't fumble very often. But the Chiefs-Texans game was an overtime game with a team that had only won one or two games at that point. I think it was one game at that point. But the Texans were running their 2 quarterback set, and I mean, they were doing some really funky shit, and it really just kept the Chiefs defense on their toes, because it was a very interesting, like, the Texans were just playing lights out. They really were. It wasn't amazing, but it was just one of those, it was unexpected. They were playing way better than anybody expected them to, but the Chiefs did end up beating them in overtime 30-24. A lot of people were saying that the Chiefs-Seahawks game was going to be close. Chiefs beat them 24-10. Another AFC West game, Chiefs-Broncos, 27-24. Chiefs win. Final regular season game, no Derek Carr, so no surprise how this one ended. Chiefs ended up beating the Raiders 31-13. I still question what the fuck the Raiders are thinking with pulling Derek Carr the way they did, aside from trying to save money from injuries. Then they go into the divisional round, get a hell of a scrappy Jaguars team, beat them 27-20. They go into the conference championship. They go against a team that's beaten them 3 fucking times in a row. One of them was the championship last year, and they were all determined by 3 points. So fourth meeting, as we all saw, very, very questionably officiated game, but the Bengals just, I mean, like, the Bengals had this game, okay? They really did. They just couldn't capitalize because the Chiefs defense was just all over them, okay? The Chiefs defense just stepped up big in that game and just held the Bengals off on almost all of their, normal bread and butter style plays. And it came down to an 8-second left in the game, field goal from Harrison Butker for like 45 yards to win the game 23-20. So another 3-point spread game. And here we are at the Chiefs-Eagles. So who has had the harder schedule? I've questioned the legitimacy of the Eagles, because the Eagles will play good teams at bad times, right? Then they've had some good teams that they've had a lot of points put up on them. So we're in this weird position of, who do I go with? Do I go with my home team? Or do I go with the team that everybody's riding a train on? And I don't mean that sarcastically or badly. And again, you guys know me, I'm unbiased. I actually chose the Bengals to beat the Chiefs in the fucking division, or in the conference round. Okay, so I can obviously choose against my own team on this one. So I look at what these teams can do. Patrick Mahomes has all of his weapons except for McCole Hardman back. The defense has all of their weapons back. And they've got good backups. Even though some are young, they've got very good backups. What's going to happen is this game is going to be determined by how well the Chiefs handle the RPO coupled with the secondary. Okay, first and foremost, the Chiefs defense has got to be able to handle the Eagles RPO game, but still be able to cover in the secondary. As of yet this season, they haven't been the best against the run, but they haven't been the worst either. Been kind of mid-level. But they've been pretty decent against any kind of RPO situations. Now, quarterbacks just breaking out of the pocket, that's a totally different thing, like basically just no read, no open reads, make a run for it because there's a hole. It's a different story. But I've watched Jalen Hurts last game of the season, okay? And then in the divisional round and the conference round. And the only thing that I question about Jalen Hurts is how well he can throw the ball, because it's because of that shoulder injury, I think, honestly, unless he just comes in way better than he has in the last 3 games that he's played, that shoulder seems to be inhibiting him to really put some stank on the ball when he's going deep with it. His shallow routes are his shallow routes, but he just hasn't really been as crisp as he's been most of the season. Because prior to the shoulder injury, Jalen Hurts was, man, he was money. Okay, he was money with what he was playing. Okay, I'm not trying to downplay the Eagles' schedule, because every team. You look at the Chiefs-Texans game. Okay, nobody expected that game to go to overtime and the Texans to really play that hard. But that's how it went, right? So just because the Eagles did have the easier schedule doesn't mean that the Eagles don't deserve props for what they've done this season, because they absolutely do. They've got a hell of a team. You've got a hell of a roster on both sides of the ball, all 3 faces of the ball. So the Chiefs defense versus the Eagles offense is going to very much come down to how much are they going to allow the Eagles to dictate the ground game. Because if they let them dictate the ground game, this is going to be a very, very, very long day with not very much play time for the Chiefs offense. I just personally wholeheartedly believe that. On the flip side of it, how well is the Eagles defense going to handle Mahomes and all of his fucking weapons? Okay. They've been susceptible to deep explosive plays, 20 plus yards. They've been susceptible in the, out in the flat, on shallow cross routes, and, not really been the best against tight ends. And then a lot of people are hyping up their D-line. And as much as I want to give props to that, because I've been watching so many highlights of Eagles games, and their D-line has been no joke. Okay, without question. There's no way you have, 4 guys with double-digit sacks and not be legitimate. With all that said, though, KC's got one of the best O-lines in the business right now. And they've got a very, very good mobile quarterback who's pretty goddamn good about getting the fuck away from pressure. So as long as they don't just dump the house repeatedly at Mahomes, which would probably be a mistake because they've almost always got an out route to worry about. If they go blitz happy on Mahomes, instead of just doing a 4-man rush, it's going to be a long day for the Eagles. Because the Eagles, the way I look at the rosters and the way I look at the way that they've played this season, they are built to be ahead. Okay, it's kind of like the 49ers versus the Chiefs in 2019 to 2020 Super Bowl. The 49ers were a team that were built to be ahead. Okay, they weren't built for a comeback. That's kind of where the Eagles are right now. They are very much built to dictate the game by getting ahead and remaining ahead and just keeping the other team off the field by just absolutely micromanaging the shit out of the clock. Okay. That's how the 49ers were in 2019 to 2020, so Super Bowl 54. And they got ahead by 10 fucking points. And the Chiefs in the fucking fourth quarter just went the fuck off. Now, do they have Tyreek Hill? No, but they've got plenty of fucking weapons that can dink and dunk or blow them up down the damn field, just depending on what the Eagles defense is dictating up to that point. There's so many factors that you take into this. And the only thing that I can say for sure is that I personally feel in my soul that this is going to be a close game. Am I going to be right about that? I don't know. If the Eagles dictate the ground game and they control the KC defense, which I just don't know that they're going to be able to do, I think they're going to give the defense tons of problems. But I don't know that they're going to just dictate the game to the Kansas City defense. I just don't. So with that being said, if they can't dictate the game, then they're going to be chasing Kansas City. And that's not the position that the Eagles want to be in. Because the Chiefs can play two games. They can blow you up down the field, or they can give you death by 1,000 paper cuts, right? And that's the two things, that's the two areas where the Eagles are just not as strong. They are not good being blown up downfield for the big plays. And then they're not great at stopping the little pinprick plays. And that's one place where Kansas City has really shined between Juju and Travis Kelce. They have really, really shined. And Jerick McKinnon. They've absolutely shined with the paper cut plays. But then you've got Tony, and you've got MVS, and then you've got Schuster that can go downfield. And then you've got Justin Watson, if he can catch the fucking ball, that can all go downfield and do big ass chunk plays. But then they've got three different running backs that they can throw at you, plus Mahomes' mobility. I personally feel like the Chiefs had the edge in this game, but just. So, I don't know. I mean, at the end of the day, this game is so intriguing. I mean, number one versus number one, MVP winner versus second runner-up. And truthfully, I think it would have been much closer if Hurts would have been able to finish the season. I know a lot of people are like, oh, you know, nobody's wanting to count all purpose. I don't give a shit. Quarterback performance is quarterback performance. You know, I mean, you look at Lamar when he won MVP. He won MVP off of his legs mostly. But it's because he dictated exactly what that offense was going to do, and it was going to be a completely different team if he wasn't on the field. Proof positive this year. So when he won the MVP, it was off of his all-purpose function. Jalen Hurts had that all-purpose function. The problem is that with him being injured, you know, a couple of games towards the tail end of the season, it just took him out of contention. So I feel bad for Jalen Hurts with that, because I think that he's a good dude. I think that he's, you know, very talented, and I think he's got a very, very bright future in the NFL. I really do. I think he's got a bright future with the Philadelphia Eagles, especially if they hold that roster together. I think that team's got a lot going for it. I mean, this is one of those games that I just don't see it being some kind of blowout on one side or the other. I really don't. Unless the only way that this is going to be a blowout is one of two things. Either the Eagles get a ton of defensive injuries, which is obviously not what anybody wants to see, or the Eagles absolutely dictate the ground game. Just 100% dictate the ground game, do 14 play drives, and just chew up the fucking clock. But I just don't see that being a consistent problem. So I see this being, you know, a pretty, you know, mid-20s score game. But I think the Chiefs are in the position to where they will be able to chip away at that Eagles defense. And I think the Chiefs can just barely edge out the Eagles. But I am so interested to see this, because I'm not trying to sit here and eat my words about it, because I'm not trying to downplay what the Eagles are at this point. They didn't get to the Super Bowl by being a wash of a fucking team, okay? I think the conference championship for them is the only thing that people want to hold in question as far as, you know, are they a great team? Well, they played a team with no quarterback by the end of it. But, I mean, let's be honest, okay? That's not something that you look at trying to do. You don't go out there to try to injure the quarterback. The defensive player was going for the ball, just like what happened to Josh Allen earlier in the season. Defensive player was literally just trying to smack the ball out of Brock Purdy's hand, hit his elbow, tore a fucking, you know, a tendon or a ligament in his elbow. and then their fourth string guy goes in, then he goes out with a concussion. What do you do? I mean, you've got a very unfortunate set of circumstances to what I think would have been a real true battle testing of the Eagles. But they battle tested themselves against a very good offensive line and against a very good defense and won. It is what it is. So here we are at the Super Bowl. I say the Chiefs edge out the Eagles barely, but there's a lot of what ifs here. Ton of what ifs, So I know it's kind of wishy-washy, but that's the best I can give you because this is just such an interesting matchup. I think the Eagles are a great team. I think the Chiefs are a great team. This is two great teams meeting each other in the Super Bowl. And it's going to be a hell of a watch. So, folks, thank you very much for checking this out, and we'll catch you after the bowl, all right? I'll shoot a video probably early in the week, and we'll just cover this, and then we'll wait till preseason, okay? So, yep, catch you on the flip side of the Super Bowl.